we need to embrace and we need to create the space where this collective intelligence of our teams, of our organizations can emerge. And this collective intelligence emerges from collaboration, from connections, from our wisdom, from our knowledge, from insights of variety of different individuals. And when we hold the space that this is all merged into a new collective intelligence, much more can happen than we can dream at this moment. And that's why our meeting today is dedicated to this shift of the leadership that is very needed nowadays. The shift from directing, controlling, commanding, to holding the space for collective intelligence to emerge, to include everyone, to give the space to every voice that it can be heard, that every talent can flourish. And this transformation from telling people what they need to do to just harvesting what's already there, to harvesting from the collective intelligence. This is something that leaders need to nurture today. And also for collective intelligence, the first base is that we are connected. And today we again have the beautiful possibility that we will experience the flow of connections with Patrick Cowden, magician when it comes to connections. Patrick has bet his life to a different quality of connections. And he's really an amazing person, speaker, leader, visionary, and I'm grateful. He is also one of the AEIOU faculty members. And Patrick, please facilitate the Beyond Flow for us for the beginning.
Hola, Sonia. And so happy I am. I'm blushing a little bit now for all those nice words you shared, you know. Blush is good, you know. It's like when you're in love, you blush a lot. And so most importantly, I'm glad to be your friend more than any of the other things you said. So in friendship, potentials arise. And I'm glad to facilitate you guys just a little bit here with the technology, but mostly with your good hearts. And I always say, you look like angels in the room to me. And you guys know, right, when you have angels in the room, what that means. It means, no. Paul, it means heaven is on earth. That's what it means, right? So that's why I'm going to bring you guys together as angels. And I'm going to give you the opportunity to step through some of these really beautiful steps with each other. And you guys ready to go? You can nod, body moves. Yeah. In this phase, you can always be unmuted and we can hear all the noises of life. I got the birds chirping right outside my window, you know, so be free for this. But, you know, when we enter a room with friends, what's like the first thing that usually happens to you when you enter a room and you see your friends, your best friends in the room? Tell me what happens.
I wanted to just share this really basic framework. I don't know how many of you are familiar with integral theory by Ken Wilber. This is like a simplified version. But what I think is really important when we are with this complexity and uncertainty is that we're aware of these three perspectives, and we try to practice this in our meditation today. Being aware of the I, where am I, what am I feeling, kind of self-awareness when I'm present also as a facilitator. The we, the relational space, how do I show up, how do we show up for each other in a way to co-create, to co-facilitate, to co-deal with this uncertainty. But also what kind of structures are we building together to enable to work with the complexity and in this ever-changing and emerging world. So I think it's a very useful framework to come back to. And so now we started with the I, and now we will move to the it. So where are we now in this world? We're moving from the world of clocks, which was predictable and controllable and bounded, to the world of clouds, which is more unpredictable and harder to control and kind of endless and evolving. And I think what is a big challenge for many of us today is that while we are still often in the systems that are designed upon modernity principles that feel to be very outdated, we sit in hierarchical structures and organic rooms in specific boxes. And there is still a lot of rules upon which our organizations are driven. But at the same time, we feel, well, the world around us doesn't work like this anymore. And there is all these parallel, more bottom-up and emerging structures that are trying to, pop out of these limiting structures. So I think a lot of us are kind of in parallel acting in these old systems and also trying to build the new systems. And this can be experienced as quite demanding or stressful sometimes. So that's why I like this new framework that's called BANI. Before we talked about VUCA, now we talk about BANI, and that stands for brittle, anxiety-inducing, nonlinear, and incomprehensible, which I think it's a good description of how many of us feel today. So there are a few different movements that I think we're kind of trying to transition through, both when it comes from the how systems work, how our organizations work, how our leadership is moving, and also how we as colleagues in organizations are moving. So kind of going from more top-down hierarchies towards more bottom-up emergence, maybe from this KPIs and plan and control measure kind of organizations towards more purpose and value-driven organizations. And so this demands also a different type of leadership. So we will a little bit dig down into the leadership. So how can we move from this directing towards facilitating leadership in this context and world in which we operate? So in my institute, we're working a lot both with industry and Swedish public sector. And we have developed this framework around the qualities of leadership that we feel are important for today and for the future. And I will just light or lift a few of the things that we feel is we see in demand now, both in industry and in public sector, and that we're trying to work with to move these big organizations from classical top-down hierarchical organizations towards more self-organization and bottom-up engagement. So it all starts with the I, with the self-leadership, with clarifying what is really my purpose, what are my values, what are my goals, and what kind of impact do I want to have with my work. And I think this is really important when we are in this world where it feels it's too much that is coming, and we have to quite be tough and prioritize and be better at saying no, because it's so easy to say yes to everything that comes. So I think becoming more purpose-driven is very important, and we try to support organizations to really engage colleagues into this work. Also, what we see is to build more human organizations is a lot about how do we bring our whole selves to work. So maybe in the past, it would be very uncomfortable to do meditation in the beginning of a meeting in a corporation, but now it feels, well, we're getting there. in more and more contexts, I must say, at least in Sweden, both in the industry and public sector, it feels okay to do this kind of more embodied and holistic exercises where we work with our whole selves. And I think also in Sweden is one of the most individualistic countries in the world. So people put a lot of pressure on themselves. They want to be perfect in their work, in their life as parents and so on. And so we have noticed a huge increase in the burnout during pandemics. And I think this is a global trend. So in a way, also setting daily routines for balance is really important in this new leadership. The other aspect that I think so nicely you embody here in this community is this caring leadership, is how can we show up for each other in a more caring and compassionate way. And how can we then let go of control and really trust each other so that we can, in a way, share the leadership. So what we are now exploring, for example, in Sweden with the work we're doing is even though we have formal structures with managers, how can these managers start to share their leadership with the other colleagues in the team so that the tasks that would be traditionally performed by the managers, like strategy development, or I don't know, decision making, budget planning, running the meetings, and so on, can be shared in the team. So it becomes more self-organized and shared leadership, and that demands also very high information transparency, but also in a way a team agreement about how we would do this. I think something that we also see from different studies has been unfortunately on a decay during pandemics is the playfulness and creativity. So when people started to meet online and also work more from home, maybe we got more time for creativity and reflection on our walks during the workday, but there is less space for this co-creation. And so I think there is a great demand into rethinking these rituals for creativity and how can we practice improvisational skills and risk-taking together, or how do we build this culture where we learn something new every day. So this kind of continuous learning and micro-learning. I think the other thing that we see is really on the rise is this complexity or system leadership. So most of the challenges we're meeting demand collaboration between different actors or demand from us to work in ecosystems. So to kind of work with like very consciously mapping out different stakeholders and then together creating a shared vision and kind of facilitating work and transformation within these multi-stakeholder groups is really important. And last but not least, because I think everything is changing constantly, a lot of people are very afraid of this, what's coming next after COVID, what's the next crisis that we can expect. So another work that we have been developing in a methodology around that is inspired by future studies and speculative design and art is how can we pay attention to these changes and how can we play with exploring what are possible futures, but also like enacting them. So we work a lot with this speculative storytelling, speculative artifacts, and then we're even embodying this futures that we see are possible. But Sonia asked me also to talk a little bit about facilitation, and facilitation is like quite a big field of practice, and we have very little time. But I wanted to share just a few basics. What we have seen also now when we work with managers from different types of organizations is that one thing that we all do is meetings, right? A lot of us sit in different types of meetings, maybe every day. And so if one should start somewhere and start small, practicing this more facilitating leadership, is in how do we even design and facilitate the meetings that we're holding or that we're part of in a way. So I think here are just some of the invitations that you might be thinking about when you are preparing or facilitating for a different kind of, could be one-on-one group meetings or even workshops. So I think one of the things that often when we sit in meetings, we're like, what was the purpose of this meeting? So often we just meet because we have these habits of meeting. At the weekly meeting, we come and we meet, but maybe we haven't paid attention to what is the purpose. So to think about that. And also to think who should be invited to this meeting? In a way, often we feel that there are people sitting in the meetings that maybe shouldn't be there. And there one can think about like who can really contribute, who will be impacted by the decisions made in this meeting, and who can bring new perspectives. Can we bring in somebody new that will kind of help us to think in a different way? Then I think when we design the meetings, there's also, as I mentioned before, here I really appreciate that we practice this tuning in. This is something that I think is lacking in a lot of meetings. So I think both in the beginning and in the end, the tuning in, the tuning out. So I'm glad Patrick will do also tuning out today. It's important to bring the group together in a way in the beginning and in the end. And while maybe in the beginning it's important to land and focus and feel who is here and why we're here, in the end, maybe it's important to hear where are we now? How do we feel? What are we taking with us? What are next steps so that we feel we can move forward? And then I think also another thing that a lot of the online meetings these days are lacking because they're so focused on a lot of points on the agenda is how can we invite to learning and reflection? So how can we both help the group to bring in different perspectives and then reflect and converge? So diverge, converge, and how can we sense what are the emerging topics that are kind of popping up from the group? I think where we could be more creative when we're facilitating is also to think in new ways about the space and time. So can we do meetings in a park or in an art museum or in a playground or wherever? We often just take it for granted that we should be sitting around a table in a conference.
Human being, we have to be ready just to nurture what we have inside of us, within us. When we are ready to nurture our heart and mind openly, and then when we are ready to listen, we're ready to accept the great ideas can come from everywhere because we are willing to listen, of course. And then when we honestly respect our environment and our colleagues and treat them with the kindness, the output that come out is more genuine. And when we talk to them, we forgot sometimes it's not about what we are saying to them or what message we want them to catch, but it's more on how we say it to them. So this basic gesture and, the kind gesture and the basic values, which is easily forgotten along the way when we are under pressure and under stress, is something that we really have to be aware and that we really have to notice the importance to continue to practice, to live harmonically and in balance. So after that awakening chat between me and my colleague, I decided to open my office door for afternoon coffee. I invite my colleagues and subcoordinates to have a coffee after lunch because normally in Jakarta,
a non-for-profit institution called AEIOU Universe, because this non-for-profit institution will organize leadership programs with the mission that we are supporting learnings in all dimensions and opening opportunities for each potential for everyone, so that we will co-create prosperity by raising the consciousness. And the vision of AEIOU Universe is that world leaders lead from love, from Aroha. So, and I'm so glad that we have here AEIOU faculty members. Patrick was already mentioned. Violeta is also here. Ina is also here. And I'm also one of the AEIOU faculty members. And 10 of us from all over the world have joined our forces and created the flagship program, the program for executives. And this program will be held in May next year in Buchin. And this program is created because we know that we need to create new solutions from a different place that we have created solutions before. And to do this, we need to open the space. We need to open up to new learnings, to learnings from the future, and to learn how to really collaborate, co-create, and to nurture this ability to sense what is needed and to act from this shared